Hello friends, Jenkins Dota here, bringing you another Dota 2 video on behalf of DotaAlchemy.com, and this video is going to be part of the Advanced Mechanics video series. And in this video, I'm going to be talking about camera movement. So the first thing that I want to show you guys is an example of how bad camera movement can get you killed in Dota. And the replay that I'm about to show you is a high-rated game, so everybody in this game is going to be pretty decent in terms of their camera movement. But still, there is always room for improvement. And then afterwards, after this replay, I'm going to show you an example of somebody who is absolutely amazing at camera movement and talk a little bit about the differences. So the first thing that I want to show you is this Ursa's player perspective, what he sees on his camera, and then we'll go ahead and check out what he could have actually seen if he had moved his camera a little bit better. So we'll do this on slow-mo. It might look a little bit laggy, but that's just because the slow-mo mode on Dota is a little bit buggy, so forgive me for that, but we will use it anyway because it is effective in seeing the amount of time that this Ursa actually had to react to a gank that is about to come. So this lane has been rather kill-intensive, lots of fighting, so this Ursa has been committing to going on the Mirana, as he does in this scenario as well. You can see that he runs in, goes for the Mirana, gets hit by the Windranger, moves the camera down, kind of indicating, oh shit, I'm getting ganked. After he commits, he runs away, uses the ultimate. The Windranger misses the shackle, but it doesn't matter because it's literally just buying time for the Ursa ultimate to wear off. And then, boom, power shot comes in, finishing off the Ursa. Huge kill for the Radiant, and that easily could have been avoided with better camera movement. So we saw it there. We saw how the camera reacted to the Windranger showing up, almost that kind of oh shit moment. And that it shouldn't have been like that just because the camera movement could have been a little bit better. And like I said, this is a high skill replay. A lot of people in this game are going to have good camera movement, but you can see there, even in a high rated game, there's still bad camera movement. There's still oh shit moments that occur, and that's because camera movement is one of those things that not a lot of people talk about or try to improve on because it's kind of weird and a little bit clunky to improve on. So we will go back and check out what so you can see here that on the player perspective, you can barely see the Windranger due to all these buffs and due to this interface pane here. You can't see the Windranger, and look at all this space up here. What wasted camera space, because nobody's going to come from up here. Nobody's going to come from behind here. The tower doesn't matter. Why does anything up here matter? This is an entire section. Almost a third of the screen is wasted camera space that could be getting vision of this Windranger, and this committal doesn't happen. And if the Windranger tries to dive the Ursa and he doesn't commit here, it's not a kill. This would have been an avoided kill. So anyway, let's check out we'll go to free camera. Fog is on the Dire, and we'll go back 10 seconds. Play it on 1x for a little bit, and we'll just take a look at the vision here. So you see that? You see the vision? You see how much time there is to react? The Windranger is seen here, walks in for about a second and a half before ganking. He was in vision, and still that oh shit moment occurs. There it is. There's the oh shit, and then there's the death right now. But you saw how much time there was to react to this, and just because the camera was wasted, there was that third of the screen that was wasted, the Windranger was not scouted at all. And let me tell you, it's a lot easier to see somebody on the actual camera than on the minimap, so the camera placement absolutely does matter. Even though she obviously would have been seen on the minimap, it's for such a brief second that if the camera was placed lower, for sure this Ursa does not die in this scenario. So in front of us we have a replay of EG versus Team Liquid. This is of course part of TI8, and we're going to take a quick look at Arteezy's perspective. And why Arteezy, you may ask? The reason for this is essentially because I believe this guy has arguably the best decision making in the world. And I've talked to a couple of other people about this and about camera movement in general, and I've basically come to the conclusion that the reason that Arteezy has the best decision making is because he has the best camera movement and the best map awareness to take in the absolute most amount of information possible. Essentially, if this guy can receive some sort of information from the map, he will. If it's possible, he will. So we're going to take a look at this game that he played. He was Spectre. He was playing against a very, very deadly lane. He's playing against Brewmaster Vengeful Spirit with a Lich supporting him. So, not an easy lane, and if he gets caught out of position at all, he's going to struggle. He's going to die. That is for sure a feed lane. So the first thing that I want to take a look at is that, of course, he is looking around the map and checking the inventories of all of the heroes that he can see in vision. And the reason for that is because he is doing nothing right now. He's literally just waiting to block. So he's essentially doing what he can to help his team gain as much information as possible by moving his camera around. But if you look during the laning phase, he doesn't do this anymore. He doesn't check the other lanes because he realizes that he is in a lane where there's a huge threat potential from the Vengeful Spirit and the Brewmaster, so he needs to essentially focus on his own lane. But of course, he's going to try to make use of every single moment by moving his camera around and seeing what he can. So I'm going to skip ahead a little bit here because they just kind of get zoned behind the tower, you know, typical off-lane, safe lane stuff, TPs to the tower. And I want to put this to be a little bit slow, and we can just take a look at how Arteezy positions his camera. We'll speed up a little bit just to go a little bit farther into the laning phase. But look how he moves his camera to see where the Vengeful Spirit is going, over to the left. He indicates to his team, okay, here's this little piece of information, the Venge is moving to the left. Now it is Lich's duty to deal with that hero. He is doing this in the downtime that is essentially allowed to him because he's walking over to the side shop to purchase something. And he knows that the creep wave is just pushing into him. So he doesn't want to walk up and contest the brew and potentially get clapped or something like that. He doesn't see a need to go for that deny, so instead he's going and putting his camera elsewhere to get a lot of information. So the most important part about this replay that I want to show you guys is that his camera is not centered around Spectre. You can actually see that Spectre is around the bottom of the camera. He's at the bottom of the screen, and that is something that we're taught by MMOs and we're taught by just a lot of other games, that you want to keep your camera centered on whatever character you're playing. But in Dota, that's actually not good. And you can see GH coming in here from the left, and Arteezy is centering his camera horizontally but not vertically. And the reason for that is because the brewer is standing on the right, so he has to avoid the brew clap. He doesn't want the brewer to be able to walk up to him where he can't turn and run away and not get clapped. So you can see there's this kind of dance going between Mind Control and Arteezy. And then he also wants his camera to be to the left so he can see if GH wants to walk up and stun him, or more importantly, because GH has been using the Howl on him, he wants to see if GH is level 2. So he might actually be looking at the creep wave, looking at the brew with his peripheral vision, and then looking at GH, because GH is really the kill hero. As soon as he gets level 2, he's the kill hero. He's the threat. So basically the most important part about this, in my opinion, is of course that he's looking at the most important, the most relevant piece of information with his direct vision, and then looking at the less relevant stuff with his peripheral vision. That is important in my opinion. And then also where he keeps his camera. Look how every time he recenters his camera on his hero, he immediately drags it so that he's not wasting any space on the screen. And the only reason that he's not utilizing this space down here and moving his camera up even higher is because, of course, there's the interface here. So a lot of the time, he's going to be trying to keep his camera in a position where essentially he can get a grip on where the most threat potential is going to come from. So if he sees that the Venge is in the lane, he's no longer worrying about horizontally keeping his camera in a position around his hero. He's going to instead just keep his camera focused on the lane. So look in this fight how Arteezy keeps his hero constantly at the bottom of the screen unless he presses his hotkey to position the camera on his hero. He keeps moving the camera so that it goes up into the team fight, because that is what is important, and he's not focused on what is unimportant until, of course, he runs away, and then he's going to look in front of him. So the most important part about this that I think is something that a lot of people don't really think about is that he's not keeping his camera focused on his hero. It's not centered on his hero, I should say. It's centered on whatever he thinks is important. It's centered on a team fight. It's centered on where he is headed, because of course if he's heading into a particular direction and somebody comes for him, he can get out of the way quickly. It's focused on potentially a creep wave that he's going to farm. Like right now you can see that his hero is actually in the bottom right of the camera, and that is going to allow him to get all of this information about this area. He's going to be able to scan it, whereas if somebody was just keeping their camera focused on their hero, they wouldn't see this area right here. They wouldn't see that liquid is coming in here, because all you would see is right here when he was there, of course. You know, like, this information is so much shittier than this information. You can see and vision liquid here. So it's really, really important, basically, to try to keep your camera focused on the most important thing on the screen and not fall victim to that kind of MMORPG, keeping your camera focused on your hero sort of thing. So the next thing that I want to show you guys is just a couple of camera options that you can set in the Dota 2 settings that are going to help you tremendously in cleaning up your camera movement and essentially just getting more information from the map, which of course, as we've seen, can be massively, massively beneficial. So the first thing that I want to show you is this camera grip option. It's just in the basic Dota 2 hotkeys. You go to the interface section and it's under camera grip. You set it to be essentially a hotkey. As soon as you press that hotkey in the game, it sets your current mouse position to be a pivot point where you can pivot the entire screen around that point. And what I have that set to, that hotkey, I have it set to my middle mouse button. I see a lot of other professional players have it set to that as well. I think S4 was the person that I copied this from. And the reason for that, the reason that it's set to the middle mouse button, is because I think it makes a lot of sense to have all of your movement on your mouse, which of course your right clicks and your camera movement, your edge panning, is going to be with that mouse already. So it makes sense to have the additional camera movement stuff tied to that mouse. And then also, whenever you are dragging the camera around, that's of course going to be with your mouse, so it makes a lot of sense to press a button that's on your mouse to trigger functionality that's attached to your mouse. So I think that makes a lot of sense. And what this is used for is tiny little micro movements of the camera where you really don't want to waste any space or overshoot or screw anything up, or you don't really have time to constantly be readjusting, which of course is what we usually do when we are using edge panning, which is kind of the default that everybody uses originally when they first start playing Dota, which makes sense. It's very effective at a lot of things, but it's not effective at the kind of short movements that you would want in situations where you're, you know, in the laning phase or in a team fight, where you want these small little movements to get a little bit more information, but you don't want to exclude information like where your hero is, or if your Spectre is low HP in the team fight. You really, really want to make sure that your camera is not going wild and crazy. So in this situation, let's consider this hypothetical. I'm this Pudge here. Obviously, this is the demo mode map, but in the real Dota map, there's a lot of scenarios like this as well. If I center the camera on the hero, which I just did by pressing my hero hotkey, this area over here, this entire area of the camera is wasted. About half the screen is wasted with terrain that I can't even, nothing's going to come from there. It's impossible. It's useless. There's a lot of places like that in Dota, terrain you can't go over, you know, the edges of the map, the corners, some different areas in the map. There's a lot of space that can essentially just be wasted if you put your camera on it. And then also down here we have a tower and a fountain. So what's the point in putting my camera there? I know what's there already. There's no enemies. There's nothing that's going to surprise me from over there. So if I center my camera on my hero, this entire space is wasted. And let's say in this hypothetical, I want to get as much information as I can about this lane. Let's pretend this is a lane, this little river thing here. There's a fight going on, something like that. So what I want to do is I want to keep my camera so my hero is still in the camera, because let's say somebody flanks me from over here. I want to know if that's happening so I can react to it, so I can blink, so I can hook, so I can dismember, do whatever. But I also want to see the team fight so I can know if it's good for me to go in, or if I'm in the laning phase, if I can walk up to the creep wave, things like that. So all I need to do is I press that camera grip function and then drag the camera over so that my hero is at the very edge of the screen, and then I can get a lot of information that if my camera was panned on my hero, I wouldn't be getting. If somebody's up here, up on the uphill, hitting down, I wouldn't see them if I had my camera on my hero, but I'll see them now, so that's going to allow me to get more information in that fight. However, look what happens if I try to edge pan to get into that situation. Okay, so that wasn't bad, but there's still a little bit of space wasted here. And that's actually, I've recorded this video a couple of times. That's probably the best first edge pan that I've done. I usually overshoot it a little bit or undershoot it. There's a lot of room for error if you're edge panning and trying to get these kind of little micro movements. But if you're doing the camera grip, it's almost impossible to screw it up because you're just gripping it and then moving it until the point. It's much more precise, essentially. So that is the number one thing that I would recommend for having good camera movement and not wasting space, especially in team fights, especially in the laning phase and when you're farming jungle camps. You can watch a lot of areas with your hero in kind of one of the corners of the camera. Okay, so a couple of other options. One of the most important options, and I would assume that a lot of you guys have this set already because it's one of the most basic options in Dota, one of the default ones that people kind of recommend that you use. You should have a select hero hotkey. I like to have it on my mouse. It's on the left of my mouse. It's one of those kind of backspace buttons. If you use a browser and you press it, it does backspace. So I have select hero, and what I use this for is, let's say I want to check out a team fight that's happening on the opposite side of the map, or I want to check out the HP of this tower. Okay, guys, this tower has 3% HP. What am I going to do? Am I going to edge pan all the way back to my hero and potentially overshoot and waste all that time trying to adjust so that my hero is where I want him to be on the camera? Or am I simply going to double tap the hotkey? Of course I'm going to double tap the hotkey, and that's exactly why you want that, because you're not going to have to waste a lot of time constantly screwing with the camera and figuring out where to put it. Some other thing that you can do with this, which is pretty effective, is if you double tap and then hold this, you can keep your camera centered on your hero, and it's very convenient for me because this is a key that's on my mouse. So my left hand is off my keyboard. I am just touching my mouse, and I'm able to walk my hero around effectively. So that is just a pretty nice thing that you can do with this. So in the same kind of train of thought as that, I think it's really important to have select all other units bound. So if you're playing a hero like Nature's Prophet, like Beastmaster, you can split up your hero and your units and then double tap either mouse 5 to get to all your other units or mouse 4 to get to your hero, and you can constantly go between multiple units without having to constantly move your camera across the map and waste a bunch of time and a bunch of effort, essentially. That's very, very effective. Another thing that I think is very important, exact same train of thought, is control groups. If you're a Beastmaster, you have a Hawk, you have a Boar, you have a Dominator creep potentially. You want to have all these things bound to something else. It's the exact same thing where you might want to have these different units in different locations, and if you have control groups set and you get used to it, you can essentially just move your camera between all of these things by double tapping those hotkeys, and that is pretty goddamn effective. Okay, so the last thing that I want to show you guys is, where is it? Options. Okay, so here are some other camera options. Edge pan, of course, by default is on. I'm sure most of you guys are very, very, very familiar with that. You can reverse the camera grip. Like I said, it's a little bit unintuitive. The fact that you're kind of dragging the entire map around, that's a little bit weird. If you don't like that, you can reverse the camera grip and it'll kind of feel like you're more moving the camera, but I like thinking about it like I'm moving the whole map. It just works for me. You can center the camera on the hero respawn. That's really trash. If that's on by default, turn that off because you're going to waste a lot of TP scrolls accidentally TPing to the fountain as soon as the camera moves. Definitely turn that off if that's on. Disable camera zoom if you have that on. It's completely ineffective, doesn't really do anything. It just can screw you over in games if you accidentally press it. Hold to select hero to follow. You don't really need this to be on because you can just double tap and then hold. So you don't, I mean, unless you don't want to do the double tap. Camera speed, I would say tinker with this. Most FPS players, that is first-person shooter players, will have the camera speed be really low, but the problem with that is that you need to have a very large mouse pad if your camera speed is low, but it's going to allow you to be more precise. But if you use the camera grip option, of course your precision is going to be pretty good anyway, so you can pump this up to high camera speeds like I have it if you want, and you can have really, really quick camera movement across the map. So basically, I would say tinker with these things, change things like 1 or 2 things at a time. Do not do a bunch of changes at once because it'll be very, very confusing. I think that you can get a lot better at Dota by simply making sure that your hotkeys and your camera options and things like that are optimal, but you can also completely overwhelm yourself, and then it just is totally pointless because you'll go back to all of your old camera options anyway. So you really need to not overwhelm yourself, train yourself over like maybe 5 days to a week on one thing. Once that's comfortable, move on to the next thing, and then eventually you'll be a much better player. A couple more options are available in the advanced options section of the Dota 2 settings, and we have a left click activates camera grip. I don't find that to be necessary at all. I find the default camera grip works perfectly for me, but you can try that out if you want to. If you have screen shake turned on, I would definitely recommend turning that off. For some reason it's on by default because it looks cool, but it really screws up with your camera movement, because it basically just, for the sole purpose of looking cool, it shakes your screen when Earthshaker echo slams, when Axe does a dunk, and all of these things. So I would definitely recommend turning that off. Smooth drag camera while spectating, that's a spectating thing. Camera deceleration, that is how quickly your camera stops moving once you move it. I have this maxed out because I don't like the thought that my camera is going to stutter in stopping movement. It's like I want to move it, so just move it, put it there exactly where I wanted to put it. If you want to tinker with this, that's definitely fine. I know there are some people that play with this at kind of half, but I prefer this to just, I move my camera to a position and it goes there.